Good evening, everybody. It's May 16th, and it's 7:01, so I'm going to call this meeting of the Committee of Precinct Chairs into session. And as we do each meeting every month, we'll stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'll be sitting in for Catherine, who's out ill this evening. She said she may try and attempt to join us online, so we'll see if that happens or not. But because we are in a hybrid format, I'd like to go through the precincts. Some chairs are online and some are here in Town Hall. So we'll start with Precinct 1.
Christine Pratt, Precinct 1.
Myself, Matt Tavares, Precinct 2. Precinct 3.
Dale Weber, Precinct 3, where it all began.
Precinct 4.
Precinct 4, Claire Montanari.
Precinct 5. And I don't think we have anyone online there. Precinct 6. All right, Robert, you're more than welcome to sit up here because it's easier to ask questions when you're up here. But if you're just sitting in to observe, that's fine too. Precinct 7.
Dave Golden, Precinct 7.
Precinct 8.
Don Williams, Vice Chair, Precinct 8.
Precinct 9. I don't believe Catherine has anyone here. Precinct 10.
Precinct 10, Alan Costello.
Precinct 11.
Precinct 11, Frank O'Brien.
Precinct 12.
Precinct 12, Pat Adelman.
Precinct 13.
Precinct 13, Susan Wentworth.
Precinct 14.
Precinct 14, Tom Begley.
Precinct 15.
Precinct 15, where it continues, Wrestling Brewster.
Precinct 16.
Precinct 16, Pompey Delafield.
Precinct 17.
Precinct 17, Alexis Kuhn, sitting in for Joe Hutchinson.
Thank you, Alexis. Precinct 18.
Pat McCarthy, Vice Chair.
All right. Okay, the first item on our agenda this evening, and I'm going to be going through this agenda as efficiently as possible. Please bear with me as I wasn't really 100% sure I was going to be running the meeting this evening, but we're going to vote on the meeting minutes for April 18th. I did want to add a note before we vote there that the March 21st meeting minutes are going to be before us next month. So if I look for a motion for the...
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion and seconded, and discussion? So I'll go through the roll because we're in hybrid format. Precinct 1.
Approve.
Precinct 2, yes. Precinct 3.
Yes.
Precinct 4.
Yes.
Precinct 5, if they've joined us. Precinct 6. Precinct 7.
Yes.
Precinct 8.
Abstain.
Precinct 9. Precinct 10.
Yes.
Precinct 11.
Yes.
Precinct 12.
Yes.
Precinct 13.
Yes.
Precinct 14.
Yes.
Precinct 15.
Yes.
Precinct 16.
Yes.
Precinct 17.
Abstain.
Precinct 18.
Abstain.
Okay. All right, thank you. I believe the tally on that. Did I? Tom, did you have a comment?
No, actually, I was just trying to wait for you to finish that, just to say that we're not seeing the room on Zoom or I think on TV. I just wanted to try to communicate that to the local scene.
All right. I think Chelsea is going to go back to the control room there. Yeah, I see on the Zoom it looks like it's just our header there. Mr. Delafield.
Yeah, with the minutes, I would just like to say I would appreciate if we could get them out a little earlier. They were awfully late in getting to us.
Agreed, and I did have that discussion this evening. I wasn't sure we were even going to be voting on these. So I agree with that. I've asked for, at a minimum, to be the morning of the Wednesday before but I'd like to see them sooner. So I agree with you on that.
Matt?
Yes, Pat?
Also, the backup material, my computer said 5:05 today, and that's kind of late to be looking at material for a 7 o'clock meeting. Thank you.
I concur. I will work to see what I can do if we have any materials and minutes before our next month's meeting. Okay. Are there any other comments before I actually get into the agenda here? Okay. So the first item up, last meeting, we had our town meeting feedback where we kind of do our, good, bad, ugly type thing. We did have some questions that came up, and they were sent over to the moderator, and I believe, Nicole Manfredi, are you here? Yeah, there you are. I don't know if you have seen all of those questions. Okay, so I don't know if it's easier for you to kind of run through them, or if you want me to ask them and then you answer, or what the easiest is.
Working. Yeah, no, I have them here. Want me to just go through them numerically? Okay.
Sure,
So the
that
first
works.
question was in regards to the green light coming on to indicate that voting had begun. And the question was, is this something that OTI can rectify? I met with Mark Feit. He was confused by the question. He had said that with the exception of 2 or 3 votes, there was a delay in resetting the system. The speed of the green light voting sequence was within a few seconds of the moderator's command. So he was looking for more information on specifically. I guess he didn't think it was a problem. So if there's more feedback you can give me, I can go back to him and get more information regarding that.
Okay, I do know that he said numerous times, it definitely felt like it was longer than 2 seconds, but I can
Okay.
review the tape if
So
you
I'll
will.
I'll circle back with him and
Right.
check in with him on that. That's obviously within their control, so that
Right.
was the best feedback I could get for you
Sure.
folks. Number 2 was in regards to the clicker buttons, and the question was, the moderator typically states at the beginning of town meeting, we know, push 1 for yes and 2 for no and so forth, and he didn't do that at our last town meeting. And the question is, could that have led to the inadvertent button pushing that led to those issues? And that was definitely something we hadn't seen before. And I can say from my end, on the tech end, it was not relevant to indicating which button to push. Those indications were coming in during debate, during discussion. And what happens is OTI needs to clear that in order for those members to actually vote. So I'm not sure what happened. It seemed a little haphazard from my perspective, but I certainly have added to my notes when I do my introduction to remind folks what those buttons represent. And so if that gets lost in the moderator's bit, I'm happy to do that myself.
Sure, and I think that kind of dovetails into the next question.
For sure.
Yeah.
And this number 3 question is also a question that I circled back with Mark on regarding the clicker buttons. Could other buttons be disabled through OTI to avoid inadvertent button pushing that led to those points of order and so forth? Could we have supplied clickers with just 3 buttons? And should the town purchase our own simplified clickers? So again, from my perspective, and I'm kind of managing that whole tech piece, what I saw were people, for the most part, voting before the green light came on. And that's an issue that continues to be a problem, and we talk about it, and it is what it is. I think that when that happens, there is the circumstance where people are kind of moving around, shifting around, they inadvertently hit their button. It stays on the screen and doesn't allow voting to happen until OTI clears that. So going forward, I think we need to be maybe more careful monitoring it, but this was an issue that was really unique to the past town meeting, this most recent town meeting. So we're trying to figure out what was different. Nothing has changed. Folks, it wasn't that folks were confused. These indications were showing up on the screen prior to voting, prior to the green light. So either people are voting too soon, or it's an inadvertent, they're just pushing it as they're moving around and so forth. I did speak to Mark about changing the handsets. This is his response. We do have simpler handsets for rent or purchase, but this would not solve the problem. The disadvantage of those handsets, they're smaller, they're slower, and they don't have personal messages, so they don't indicate yes, received, no received. And there's no place to put an identifying sticker. So you can't, I can't remember, because I'm often in a haze of technology, but he puts indicator stickers on the clicker. They can't do that with these other models.
Sure.
So take that as you will. Number 4 was a question about Zoom participants. Before town meeting starts, could they be let in 15 minutes prior? They are currently let in 30 minutes prior. So if they're not in, that's on the responsibility of the member. We open the Zoom session a half hour before, and the V-Voter session 15 minutes before town meeting. So, and I'm typically, generally, with the exception of things that are happening kind of live, I'm logged in and problem solving at 7:30.
Did you have a?
Yeah, just a comment on that. I was Zooming, I had to Zoom in, and I must say I had a little technical difficulties and would almost miss the first bids because of not being able to do it. So maybe it's my fault, but I wasn't able to get in early from where I was.
Sure, so understood, thank you for saying that. That's why we provide that number for the tech support, because I try to manage the tech support on my end virtually, but if you, as yourself, if you can't get in, I'm not helpful to you. So always reach out, but that window is open by 7:30.
And that is what I ended up doing. and it worked
Perfect, awesome, thank you. This is the tricky question. The next question was regarding to Zoom participants being notified of who's in the queue to speak. And I'm going to share with you the notes that I have from the moderator regarding this. It is tricky. I know it looks like it's a little bit simplistic, but it's not. So a few parts to this answer. 1, the moderator doesn't provide the information when there is, the moderator does provide this information when there is a motion to close debate. He is typically really good about mentioning how many people are in the queue. However, some things to know. Just because you're in the queue doesn't mean you're going to speak. And he tries to be careful about, or mindful of people who have spoken multiple times and people who have not spoken yet. And we know from the past that he will bump folks who haven't had a chance to speak ahead of folks who are standing at the microphone. So knowing who's in the queue standing isn't always an accurate perception of who's going to speak, because there are also people who intend to speak who have not stood. Also, there are 4 mics stationed for speaking, and local scene, I keep wanting to call them PAC TV, they don't have the ability to station cameras on all 4 microphones. So what's happening is when the moderator needs to indicate how many people are in the queue, he has to look at my monitor, take that number of people in the virtual queue, and then add that to the number of people at their microphones. It's time consuming, it's a lot. Would it be more convenient for you to know that as a remote participant on an ongoing basis? Sure, but it's a challenge and it takes up time. So we've talked about it a lot. I've brought that to the moderator's attention several times. He's aware. He does his best, particularly when there's a motion to close debate, to share the number of people in the queue, but there's a lot of moving parts.
I think when we were 100% virtual, I feel like I did see at that point when we were using whatever technology was there, and I know I'm not expecting you to have possibly that answer this evening,
that's okay.
but I feel like when we were 100% virtual, you could actually see who was in the queue to speak, and I don't know if that was because we were 100% virtual, or, I understand in the hybrid format it's harder.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
So I don't know, I guess my question is, for at least the Zoom participants, or the virtual participants, why is that option not available anymore?
So I don't remember that. This has been an issue from day one, from way back in 2020 when we shifted to remote. And that was a concern, and we've been addressing that from day one. And I've kind of been, I understand, but I've been repeating to folks the challenges. So, and I'm only saying that because I don't remember it being an option, but I'm wondering
Does anyone
if it
else
was.
here
No,
remember
and
that?
I'm not challenging
Yeah.
you.
No,
Please
no,
don't
I know.
take it
I
that
just
way.
want to make sure I'm not making it
No,
up.
I just truly remember this. This has always been an issue with folks, and I've been trying to resolve it for so long. So perhaps the camera was panned at the time, and you were able to see collectively, but you still don't see the folks in the virtual queue. So it still requires the moderator to take that number, take the number at the microphone, do some quick math. It's not complicated, I get it, but it's tricky, and it upsets the flow of what's happening in the moment. So I understand and respect it's still an issue, so we'll continue to talk about it, and maybe there's a way to resolve that going forward. I don't want to speak for the moderator or local scene, who is managing the tech piece, and I feel like they are under-recognized in this whole process. So that's that. And then the last question was regarding the cost to OTI. So we're in the middle of, their contract has ended at the last town meeting, so we're in the middle of procurement now. But I can give you the numbers for fall 2023 and spring 2024. Fall 2023 town meeting was $12,016. And spring 2024, as we all know via PTSD, that it went 2 sessions. So the total for spring town meeting was $16,974.73. And I can give you the breakdown if you would like.
I think we're okay.
Okay, so that was just the OTI contract amount. And like I said before, and I know that the town clerk is here, and she can, if there's any questions regarding the procurement of a new contract, she can speak to that.
Yeah, I know I received an email from the assistant town manager stating that the procurement department is in the process, since the meeting just ended.
So I can say wearing a different hat.
Yep.
I work for the Massachusetts State Senate, and I met with 2 representatives from 2 other communities that are local, and we talked about, it was as an aside, it was not about town meeting, but we were just kind of off the record talking about town meeting. And they were floored by the complexity of our town meeting. And they don't have a hybrid model, and they don't have the hybrid voting option. But when we talked about the complexity of what we do, I'm just validating the amount of work that OTI puts into this project. And it's unmatched in the area. And I think that, I feel strongly that it's important that we provide, we break down those barriers for town meeting members, and that everyone has the opportunity to vote. And if that means they're out of town or homesick or what have you, this is an important piece to that democratic reach.
I think we have a few
Sure.
hands in the room, and then I see Chris Pratt has raised her hand online. I'm going to start with just the ones that I saw first. So, Mr. Brewster.
Thank you, Nicole. So going back to the clicker.
Yep.
I've asked the moderator on numerous occasions on town meeting floor and before town meeting, can you just go over the 3 buttons?
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate you taking that on as a, if he gets overwhelmed, that you take it over.
Absolutely. And if it's repeated, it's repeated.
Right,
Yep.
because it's an important part of, we have a lot of new members at every
Sure.
town meeting, and it's important to remind people of that. I think people just put the clicker in their pocket, that's why it was getting pressed, but I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that our biggest concern, and I don't want to speak for everybody else, was the flow seemed to be interrupted by that light.
Absolutely.
And that's the concern we had, that on numerous occasions, more than twice, the moderator said, when the light goes on, when the light goes on. And it seems, I'm a technology background, so it seems like when they had to create a new slide was when they had those problems.
Right.
And if you have a generic slide that you can pull up, might be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Mr. Costello, did you have a comment? I thought I saw. Yep.
Yeah, I actually just had a couple quick questions. Not to break down the 5th question, but is OTI and V-Voter the same organization?
OTI is the name of the agency, V-Voter is the name of the platform, so yes.
So this dollar amount covers both sides of,
So OTI is it's the company, and V-Voter is the platform that the company is providing the service for.
okay, so
Yes.
this number is the total number for both services?
But not including local scene. Not including, correct, yes,
Local scene is the old PAC TV. There's a charge for that
yes. But
over and above?
I'm gonna pass that on to the town clerk, because that comes from cable funds, and that is way out of my realm of authority. So if you have questions about that, they're not for me, they're for her.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't know that was a third charge, but at your convenience, I mean, you don't have to do it now, but at your convenience, if you could explain that, if it's not too complicated, why?
You knew that.
How much are we paying them and why are we paying them?
So, thank you for having me here. So first of all, coming from another community, the fact that we have local scene, Plymouth should count their blessings that you have that type of. And this was started so many years ago. And every cable bill that you get has a surcharge on it, and that money gets paid to the towns, and the towns use that for cable services. What happens is that money in Plymouth goes directly to local scene. The former finance committee chair informed me $1 million is budgeted to local scene every year from Plymouth. And I believe in their contract, they give us 2 meetings a year, fall and spring. And if we end up with a special, we end up having to pay them extra money to handle that special town meeting. So the $1 million covers the.
So is the,
No, am I wrong? I never paid for special. Oh, we never paid for, I didn't know Lynn was in the room, I would have walked away. So I asked them if it comes to the money.
my first thing, and maybe you've already answered, is we had a Springtown meeting and we had a spring special, but that was all under the same charge.
Yes.
Okay, then the fall has its own charge. So that's the
Well,
2 meetings.
Again, finance director just said we don't get charged for it because it's in the contract. It's, the town meetings that we have in Plymouth is in the contract that local scene provides video services for it. The town pays local scene $1 million a year.
Okay, is that $1 million?
Lynn, do you wanna come in and help Kelly out? And that's no knock on Kelly. Is
What she's saying is accurate. So we have a contract, well, we get that money on the cable bills from Comcast and Verizon. It comes to the town. We have a contract with PAC TV to provide all the services that they provide, like these meetings, the select board meetings, there's like 4 or 5 committees that they provide services for, plus our town meetings. So it's all included in the contract that we have with PAC TV. Part of that fee also goes over to the school for Ed TV, so that's a separate sort of contract that we have, that money goes over to the school for Ed TV. The only thing that we pay for out of the town budget for town meeting, in addition to OTI, is we pay for the, that new service that we have, the
monitor for closed captioning.
the closed captioning. We pay for that. We pay for the police details that are attending town meeting, the staff from the clerk's office.
Yeah, that's
attends the
understandable.
meeting.
I'm talking about the subcontractor. So how much are we paying for the closed caption?
Closed caption, it's like, I mean, I'd have to look it up, but I think it's less than, it's like around $1,200, something like that.
All right. And then just quickly on the money that's charged on every cable bill, whether it's Comcast or Verizon, that goes to the town.
Yes.
And that $1 million comes out of that fund, or is that in conjunction with the individual subscribers' bills?
Nope, comes
Town
out of
gives
that
$1 million,
fund.
so it comes out of that.
fund.
So town collects about $1 million, we give the $1 million right to local scene
Yes.
for complete coverage for the
Yeah.
year.
We get about $1.5 million, so $1 million goes to local scene, and the other $500,000 goes over to the school for Ed TV.
For the school.
Mhm.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, Chris, if you still have a question, come on in.
It's more a statement. I think OTI has been with us now for a number of years, and certainly there's always room for improvement. But, I think Mr. Brewster he's been very, very persistent in making that effective recommendation on, show people how to use the clicker. And we should do that. But overall, town meeting works well. The click is, that your vote's received. You've got yes, no, abstain. And just the thought of potentially bringing in another contractor, not so sure. I think the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. So, I think we, on our side, can do a better job of educating new town meeting members and maybe having a heightened sensitivity to how we manage the clickers. But the bottom line is, generally speaking, town meeting works pretty well. That is my opinion. And OTI is a part of that process. They've got it down pat. I think Mr. Brewster's suggestion of maybe a generic slide would speed up the green light process. So that's another good suggestion by Mr. Brewster. But other than that, I think, let's not look for more trouble or, consider orienting a new contractor, because we're just going to go through the same headaches that we went through with OTI in the beginning. So that's my 2 cents on this process.
Okay.
Can I just speak to that?
Sure.
I very much enjoy serving the town in this capacity. There is no stipend for me. This is all for the benefit of the good and all of that. I can tell you with full honesty that the majority of the issues are user-based. And when I say majority, I mean all. But no, truly. And I'm happy to problem solve. I enjoy helping. Like it's fulfilling for me. It's great. But we haven't come across an issue where we're like, oh no, there's a major glitch in our system. There isn't. Is there a glitch sometimes with service, like when folks are having trouble with their Wi-Fi and things? For sure. And some people forget that we remind them before town meeting not to use their phone, and we know that's not reliable. So like things like that happen, but there hasn't been any cases where and honestly have said, or have had to say, this isn't working, this is a problem. So I feel it's mostly successful, but the feedback is great. The blank slide is a great suggestion. I'll bring that back to OTI. Even if they just have several for just in case scenarios and they're kind of ready to go. They will still have to plug in the article or whatever's being motioned, so it will still take a little bit of time, but good suggestion.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, are there any other questions online, or Mr. Costello?
Just quickly, because I know we have a big agenda, and someone could probably answer this. The Cable Stabilization Fund, does any of that
It's not me.
money go to PAC TV or local scene? In conjunction with the 1 million?
Lynn Barrett, Finance Director.
So what we have is a cable enterprise.
Enterprise, I'm sorry,
fund.
yeah.
And the cable enterprise fund is the fund that receives those receipts from Comcast and Verizon. And that's the fund that we pay local scene and Ed TV out of.
So when we, in the springtime, fund that enterprise fund with $1.5 million, that's the money coming in from the cable bills?
Yes.
All right, fair enough, thank you.
Yep.
Any more comments or questions? If not, Ms. Manfredi, thank you so much
You're welcome.
for coming in.
Sure.
To your point, thank you for your volunteer time. I know there's a lot of volunteer
That's
time.
not why I said that.
Yeah, no, but I don't think it does get said enough, and Plymouth has been a leader in this hybrid format. This is where I was going with, to your point, in your discussions up at the State House, that it is pretty unique. We do have our hiccups, but these discussions, I think, will help facilitate everything. So that's fantastic. So thank you all very much. Okay, the next item the chair had put on the agenda was for a discussion on affordable housing, And I think that this primarily came out of kind of some confusion between 40B and 40R. And I know Mr. Hartman had kind of put together a couple paragraphs, but if he could just kind of help the chairs here to be able to better explain to the rest of our town meeting members, because I think that there's some confusion out there in the community that kind of the difference, so high-level points are good.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I'll go through, Lee Hartman, Director of Planning and Development for the town. So I'll go through a couple points, and then any questions you have, happy to answer. So 40B is something that was established in 1969 by the state. 40B is called comprehensive permit. It's also known as the anti-snob zoning law. So in 1969, they recognized that many rural and suburban communities did everything to avoid multifamily development. And they said, we're going to pass this law that says that if you don't have 10% of your housing stock as deed restricted affordable, a developer can come in and override local zoning and do something totally different. So that's where the comprehensive permit comes. The state defines affordable housing as 80% of the average family income. I just looked at our numbers today, unbelievably to me. A family of four, that 80%, which is called low income, is $117,000 a year for a family of three. So when we're talking about affordable housing, it might be more affordable, but it's certainly not deeply affordable. And we had that whole discussion at town meeting when we talked about that. So again, anti-snob zoning, what a 40B does is it's a expedited permitting process. So when somebody comes in with a 40B to the town, the zoning board acts as the planning board, the Board of Health, the Conservation Commission, any other permits that might be issued. So it's a one-stop permit issued by the zoning board, and they have a very tight 30-day timeline to act on it. We see that overwhelmingly any decisions that are found by a town to be against a developer, that those are usually typically almost always overridden by the state. So the state has said, this is such an overriding priority to provide affordable housing that almost everything else goes by the wayside. Let's see what else to point out on 40B. So we have two examples of 40B, or three examples right now that are under construction. One is the Oasis, which is off of Home Depot Drive. One is the Mark, which I think, not the Mark, the Walk, which they are now calling Hanover, over behind Dick's Sporting Goods and the Walmart. And then the other one is the Sawmill development that is located off of Kathleen Drive in Manamet. That one I like as a good example. So that land was zoned off of Kathleen Drive for the ability to have about 20 homes. The developer came in and did 200. And that's the order of magnitude we talk about with 40Bs. When we look at our 40B subsidized housing list, so to hit that magic number of 10%, which would give us the ability to say no if we want to any future 40Bs, we have just under 6.9% is about where once the projects that are out there are done, we're at 6.9%. So that means we have about another 897 more affordable units that have to be provided before we could hit that 10%. So that's still a very high bar. That's a lot of units that would have to come online.
And is that 6.9%, roughly 7%, is that projected by like the end of this year, or the?
It's just with the projects that are
the
pretty
current
much out
projects
there
that are
under
out there?
construction, right. So I can tell you right now, we have two 40Bs that are knocking on our door right now. One on the former Sheehan property on Hedge Road for 150 units. Those are owner rental, so only 20%, 25% of those will count towards that 10%. The other one is the Claremont property, which was approved as a 55 and older, which they're now looking to convert to a 40B with 300 units. Because that's rental, 25% of the units are affordable, all 300 units will count. So that's, and I talked about this a little bit at town meeting. If it's a rental property with 25% that is rental, then all of those units can count. If it's home ownership or condos, only the units that are affordable will count.
Sure, I think you prompted the same question. Mr. Golden, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lee, every single time a unit is built, though, it moves the goalpost, does it not?
So if it's the rental and you have like the walk where you have 320 units, all 320 count. So those are the ways we can get the biggest chunks. But certainly, yes, so if you have 100 single-family homes that you're building, or at Sawmill, 200, so yeah, 25% of those count as affordable, but you've also just raised the bar because of all the other units you want. So you're constantly, if it's home ownership and not rental, chasing that number. And every house built otherwise at the town, like the Pine Hills or Red Brook or other places, those will count also, so that as you have that background development. Our number right now is frozen based on the 2020 census. So as we if we hit 10%, 2030 census comes in, our number changes. So it is a moving target.
Mr. Brewster.
Yeah, Lee, thank you for coming and providing this information. As a town, being the director of planning, how do you control this? Because, but what I've been seeing is the Oasis is a prime example. NIMBY didn't want the high-end auto shop, and so the developer wanted to do one thing, and we said no to that. So he said, fine, I'll just go with 40B, and the state says you can do whatever you want. So how do you get control of that? Because
the only way is to hit that 10%. Now, if we do 200, and I think it's about 280 units in a year, we can get a 2-year safe harbor where we can say no for 2 years, but really that 10% number is the only thing. To me, it's very disappointing because it's a one-size-fit-all law from 1969, and there have been a number of discussions about changing, but I don't think it's going to change. It's a law that we're stuck with as a community. And we had 2 40Bs back-to-back, so 640 units. I don't think there is another community in the Commonwealth besides maybe Cambridge and Boston who's seen that. And we don't get credit, just the way the state, we don't get credit for 4 years, you just get 2 years. And so their goal, and my whole experience I've had with the state on the 40B, they're not that concerned about the local level. They want to create that housing production, and that's their main goal.
Sure, go ahead, Mr.
I can't remember what town it was, but they recently voted to not go for the MBTA thing. So could you speak to that? It's just,
so that's,
I keep seeing an unattainable goal, and the entire town of Plymouth becoming a 40B and being overdeveloped.
yeah, and those changes have to happen at the state level. So right now, I just had this week, there were 12 communities who have opted not to comply with the MBTA communities. Right now, 61, including Plymouth, have submitted something to comply, but 12 communities have, at this point, said they are not going to comply. And they'll face whatever repercussions. You know, the governor and the attorney general has made it clear that they will be
people
taking
start saying
action.
no. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead. Mr. Williams.
Dave, thanks for, or Lee, thanks for coming in and talking. You're in the Gordian knot here, and I realize that this is a state issue, but that's the real issue. The real issue is we do need the affordable housing. Otherwise, our workforce is going to be much lower than we need to continue our sustainable growth. But has anybody said, hey, look, we ought to get together, go to our state legislatures and get them to change it so that it really is affordable housing, because this isn't affordable housing.
Yeah, and from time to time, those conversations do come up. I think there's just a very strong housing lobby in Massachusetts. Even when you see, we've worked for decades through the APA, American Planning Association, Massachusetts chapter, through the state agency, I'm trying to remember the name of it, that for all towns, the overall group that represents towns in the Commonwealth, tried for decades to make real reforms to our zoning laws, and the only thing we got was MBTA communities and more housing flexibility, and nothing that will help us with many of the other the MMA.
But the
so,
stated purpose is invalid.
It's
I mean,
difficult.
it's ridiculous. It
Yeah.
really is.
And I'll tell you from my standpoint, it's very frustrating, because the other thing we see is that some of the last pieces of commercial land, we have very little left, and it's all going to yet more residential development.
Yeah. It doesn't give us the choice, and it doesn't give us the result. What does it give us?
Would you like to go on to 40R?
So 40R, fortunately, is a local option. So 40R is totally in the hands of town meeting, whether you do it or don't. And so 40R is what they call smart growth, transit-oriented smart growth. And our example of a 40R is Cottage Park, where we went in and said, look, we want to approve this. So what town meeting did, and Cottage Park is a good example, said, we'll approve this 40R that allows for up to 675 residential units on that property. Town meeting voted that, a bylaw, design standards, a lot of stuff behind it. It's not just, you said, yes, you can do 675. But when town meeting voted to adopt that district and adopt that density, that means it's approved. The only thing they've done since that vote of town meeting is come back to the planning board for site plan review for the buildings that they were actually constructing. So 40R says, we as a town look at this site, it's transit-oriented, the state agrees, and we're gonna create 25% affordable, but we're gonna vote it here at town meeting, and it's approved. And so the positive thing for a developer is that there's limited ability to have any kind of appeals or fighting from abutters. Cottage, the biggest reason they did it is because Kingston was threatening to sue the town and appeal any decision for any kind of development at the Cottage. And that was probably the biggest reason the developer said, let's go ahead and do it. There are incentives with the 40R too, and I was just going back and looking at it. So what they give you is when you develop, and we're looking at Cottage, 3,000 units for every unit constructed. So in between phase 1 and phase 2, which is just around 300 units, 400 units total, we've received 906,000. And plus, when we first adopted it, we had a payment of 600,000. So we received about $1.5 million from the state as incentive money for adopting that Cottage. So there is a positive. The only thing I would caution, and your father's the one who said it, don't bank on that. If we ever do another 40R, they have that commitment, but in my career, I've seen so many commitments by the state that go unfunded. So right now, they've complied and they have met their requirements, but there is, if we ever adopt another one, that would be in your father's honor, speaking to say, they have committed to give us the 600,000 if you adopt the zoning, and then 3,000 per unit, but if their budget runs tough, don't bank on that. Hope it's there, but don't bank on it. The other part of it with the 40R is something called 40S, and I was looking at that. So 40S says that if there is a difference between the revenue, we'll look at Cottage, so we have the Harbor View, Harbor Walk, Harbor View, there's too many harbor things in town. So they're multifamily. You look at the number of children there, and you look at the taxes that brings in. And if there are more costs to educate those students than you bring in taxes, the state will give you additional funds on 40S. When we looked at phase 1, and I just, you guys, thank you. You had me prompt me to go back to the school and ask for some new numbers. But when we last looked at it, they had 0.07 kids per unit there. And so when we looked at that, it's not going to qualify that there's more income, well more income that's coming in than what it costs for the students that are actually there. But again, we're going to look again to see if those numbers change, especially since the second one has been built. And again, just like 40B, if it's all rental and it's 25% affordable, which Cottage is, then all those multifamilies count. They do, I think, at some point plan to do condos, so in that case, it would only be the units that are affordable that counts, not the total project. So again, it depends on what they do, but that's how it would work. And I think That, and again, the big thing about 40R is it's our control. We get to decide whether we want to do it or not. And it's fairly high. I think it's 20 units per acre is the density they want, compared to the 15 unit per acre in MBTA communities.
Any further questions for Mr. Hartman, either online or here in the room? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Hartman, for taking time this evening to come in. I think that was great for us. Yeah, sure.
That scary number I gave you of a family of four earning 117,000 as low income. We all know that's a good number for a family. So I think the real issue that we need to tackle moving forward, and we saw it at this last town meeting, is how do we go lower than 80? How can we go to 60, 70, or 50% AMI to actually provide not just affordable that meets the state requirement, but affordable that really helps the young families and the seniors in this town to have a place to live. And again, I think we're all starting to focus on that a little more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hartman. Okay, moving along, unless there's any objections, I think these two topics, the way the chair intended, they kind of dovetail together. So I'd like to welcome the Director of Public Health, Karen Keene, here. She's going to kind of give us a presentation on Title V septic systems, but is Doug, who's here from, I think it's going to probably dovetail into this wastewater management conversation, so.
It will.
Be prepared. Don't sit so far away. But,
it definitely will.
But welcome, Karen, and the floor is yours.
Precinct chairs. So, hello. Did I just press the little button? Oh, there we go. So, a septic system. You either have town sewer or you have a septic system. A septic system consists of a septic tank, a distribution box, and a drain field, or sometimes called a soil absorption field. We actually refer to it as an SAS, a soil absorption system here in Plymouth. The septic tank digests organic matter, separates the floatable matter, such as oils and grease, and solids from the wastewater. The liquid, known as effluent, is discharged from the septic tank, in my little drawing, into a series of perforated pipes buried in a leach field designed to slowly release the effluent into the soil. This area is also known as the drain field. Alternative systems use pumps or gravity to help septic tank effluent trickle through sand, organic matter, constructed wetlands, or other media to remove and neutralize pollutants like disease-causing pathogens, nitrogen, phosphorus, and other contaminants. Such alternative systems are designed to evaporate the wastewater or disinfect it before it's discharged to the soil. So current Title V regulations define drinking water protection, nitrogen-sensitive areas as Zone 2, meaning you have a well, and imposes loading restrictions. What that means is if you have a well at your house, you need 10,000 square feet for every bedroom that you have. And that's by Title V definition. A Title V bedroom is a room that's 10 by 7, ceiling height of 7 feet, has heat, and has a window. There's a little confusion sometimes about bedroom count when we talk about real estate. Real estate says, well, there's no closet, so it can't be a bedroom. We go by to the Title V definition, which is what I just shared with you. So what did the state look at? The state said, well, you know what? Why don't we put together a new designation called the Natural Resource Areas, or NSAs. So a stakeholder group subcommittee met on September 2020, February 2021, and June 2022 to discuss potential changes to the nitrogen-sensitive areas, or NSA, provisions of Title V. They talked about the expansion of the definition, defining how these areas might be determined, new nitrogen requirements for certain areas, compliance options, and implementation schedule for new requirements. At that time, a portion of Plymouth was included in the new NSA group. Then in 2023, they met again and said, know what, Plymouth, no, you're not. So now Plymouth is in the pink area, where we are an area that could potentially be designated as nitrogen-sensitive area in the future. The area in green are the watersheds that the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection has automatically designated as nitrogen-sensitive areas. So we are now in the pink area, which could be in the future, but not currently. So why are they talking about this anyway? Well, many estuaries do not meet the Massachusetts water quality standards. This is a problem, not only an environmental problem, but also an economic problem. It causes a decline in fishing, shellfishing, recreational opportunities, tourism, real estate values, and business. And unaddressed, this problem will only become worse. So what's the good news? Well, let me tell you. This is what Plymouth does to make sure that we're protecting our aquifer. Anyone who pulls a building permit in the town of Plymouth must go through a review process for Title V through the Department of Public Health. We make sure that the bedroom count does not exceed what the septic capacity could be. We enforce deed restrictions on property to prevent future capacity exceedance. We also look, and it's not there, but I wanted to add, any system that's over 30 years old also requires a Title V inspection. So say you want to do some work on your house, but your septic system is over 30 years old. We would require that a Title V be done on your house before we would sign off on that building permit. All proposed plans for septic design are reviewed by the Health Division. Any variance that's requested is reviewed and voted on by the 5-member Board of Health. Other measures that the town of Plymouth takes, cesspools are not allowed. That's not true in all municipalities. There are municipalities in Massachusetts that allow cesspools. Plymouth does not. A notice is sent to an owner to upgrade within 2 years of discovery. So once we discover that someone does have a cesspool, we send a notice to them that they have 2 years to upgrade that to a compliant Title V system. And then also we implemented the short-term rental regulations. So what are some of our concerns? Title V transfer of ownership is a big one, especially here in Plymouth. A Title V inspection is not required when a transfer is within a trust or between blood relatives. So a lot of our cottages and our 365 ponds have transferred from family member to family member. That does not trigger Title V. That cesspool that's been there since 1950, when Uncle Billy built the house, can stay there. That's a problem. But that's a change in the state law. That's something that we can do here on the local level. That would have to be a change in the actual law of Title V. The short-term list is also an issue because we received that list from the Department of Revenue, often outdated or not reported. So we have to put it on Nancy Drew's shoes and kind of figure out who really is a short-term rental and who's not. We just sent out a batch of letters reminding people that they needed to register effective May 1st, 2024, and I have to say 70% of them got returned to sender. So that's an issue. So a little bit of a summary. Why are we concerned if something has too much nitrogen? Because it causes eutrophication, which means excessive growth of nutrients in the water, causing dense growth of plant life, death of animal life from the lack of oxygen. This could be from septic systems, fertilizers, agricultural, and stormwater runoff. Title V regulates the septic nitrogen effluent to protect the drinking water. We talked about impact to Plymouth's economy. And a poll of residents by the Cape Cod Commission revealed up to 1/5 of the population might consider stopping water-based recreation altogether or leaving the Cape area if local waters were to become too polluted due to high levels of nitrogen. If nothing is done, water quality will continue to degrade. Ecosystems will deteriorate and perhaps collapse, and waters will become unusable for humans. So we talk about alternative or IA systems. These systems prevent excess nutrients, such as nitrogen, from entering estuaries, coastal waters, and freshwater ponds. So people might be wondering, will I have to upgrade my existing Title V system? If your system is in a watershed, and that's the, again, we're not in the watershed currently, but we may be in the future, you will need to add nitrogen removal to your Title V system within 5 years from when that regulation becomes effective. Is there funding available to assist individuals in this upgrading their Title V system? Yes, that's the good news. Funding is available for septic system upgrades through the Community Septic Management Loan Program. Usually, a homeowner pays off the betterment loan over time as an additional line item on their property tax bill, and then you can get some additional information there. And that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, I think that opened up a whole slew of questions in my mind, but they might dovetail into you over there. But I'm going to start here with Mr. Williams.
Karen, my gratitude for what the Department of Health is doing is still at a fairly high level, because you're doing what you can do. There are two things that need to be done that are outside of your bailiwick that I wish you could get more involved in, and that's runoff and sand removal. The issue in Plymouth, at least in the freshwater ponds, is not nitrogen. Nitrogen is not what causes the cyanobacteria. It's not what causes the algae blooms. It's phosphorus. Phosphorus is not easy to remove, not nearly as easy to remove as nitrogen. So right now, to me, as the president of a watershed association who's experienced firsthand 2 cyanobacteria blooms that are caused by phosphorus, I'm not terribly optimistic. And sewering is not the magic that people think, because sewering involves 2 things that are expensive: chemicals and pumps for transportation. So if you're going to do sewering, I think you should look at packaging plants. That's the best thing.
I think you'll get some information when the folks that are behind me come up.
I get that. But the other thing about the add-ons that you were talking about, they have been tested on the Cape. The Cape is a good place for us to look, because that's where we're going. And they are expensive to install. They're $20,000, $30,000 a piece. They're getting, and I've heard that they're more, but they're getting right up there with what it costs to put a sewer line in front of you. So the real question here for municipal governments is, how are we going to pay for this? Because people are not going to have a spare $20,000 to just throw something at a sewer line or an add-on. And the add-ons work. There's no mistaking about that. But it's a little disturbing to me, too, that the state is targeting nitrogen in our area. We have 375 freshwater ponds. They're not saltwater ponds. They're not estuaries. We have some estuaries, but they're not anywhere near the problem of the 10 or so ponds in Plymouth that have cyanobacteria blooms every year. So I'm wondering if there's any thought in the Board of Health of grabbing this by the throat and going after some of the egregious violators of runoff and sand removal, and that would be a darn good start. Not many people know why the sand works. It's not just because it's more distance between the pollutants on the surface and the aquifer underneath. It's because there's iron in that sand that slows down the egress of the pollutants into the aquifer. Doesn't stop it completely, but it sure gives us a little bit of time to think this out. So that's a long question. I think most of it's rhetorical. But Well, yeah, but that's the situation we're in, and I'm hoping that one of the departments in the town can take a hold of this and treat it with the amount of seriousness and existentialism that it needs to be treated with. So, thanks for listening.
I think there might have been a couple questions in there, but I think some of them related more towards the sewer and possible sewer expansion. If I could just kind of ask a question here, one would just be, do we, I know cesspools are a little hard to calculate because of the cottages, like you mentioned, but how many septic systems are we looking at here, and roughly in the town of Plymouth?
Well, I think, is it 30% of the town is on sewer?
Okay.
Less, so.
Right,
10.
that was going to be
So that's it.
the other piece of the
Yeah.
question was,
There you
I
go.
probably should have led with that question, I apologize. And so 30% of the town is on sewer, and then I guess this is why I wanted to kind of bring these two topics together is, what is the, I've heard in the past, and this was a number of years ago, about, potentially expanding the sewer, town sewer, but also into different ideas of, well, how can we do that with such a large area?
Yeah.
Yep. And that's
That's-
that's why I'm putting this
that's
together.
not
You
my
two are not off
ballgame.
the hook, because I'm sure there's more questions coming in behind me, so.
Hello, everyone. Doug Penard, wastewater manager, here tonight to try to answer some questions. Obviously, it seems like sewer expansion. So to follow up with Karen a little bit, we have, or to answer your question, we have approximately 3,700 sewer accounts, which is probably about 1,400 people. 14,000, I'm sorry, 14,000, yes. So it's about approximately 3,700 accounts. Actually, I brought a map, or the sewer map. I don't know if I can you pull that up? That's okay, thanks. Just to show you the area of the town that does have sewer. Phosphorus is an issue. One of the things that you might recall at town meeting was myself, in the short time I've been here, I've been trying to be proactive with repairing some of our aging collection system with a CMON program. Currently, we're working with a consultant, Weston & Sampson, on a CWMP, which is basically a sewer master plan. I went to this last town meeting, and we talked about a tertiary filter, which would, I'm looking at phosphorus, because that is becoming a hot topic. As you can see on the overhead, that is the area. It's about 82 miles of sewer in town. But to get to the CWMP, and part of your question with the sewer expansion, what we've asked or tasked Weston & Sampson to do is to look at not only just our collection system and sewer expansion, but and also the needs areas where we could do possible sewer expansion, and also look at some of these potential smaller plants, or actually collaborating with some of the smaller private treatment plants that are in town to accommodate some of those sewer expansions. We are really, really early in that process. It's just data collection right now, but we've given them information on the collection system, the current 8 municipal-owned pump stations that we have, and some of the private pump stations and treatment plants that we have in town. We've also given them information at the treatment plant. They'll be looking at that for upgrades. Is there something else? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Kendra Martin, the water wastewater engineer for the town. I just wanted to clarify something too on this map. This is the town of Plymouth-owned sewer system. So Red Brook has its own wastewater treatment plant and sewer system. Pine Hills has their own. White Cliffs has their own, and there's one out at the airport as well, which are probably like the bigger systems that you think of in town. So there are other privately owned wastewater treatment plants in town. There's also one at the power plant as well. But this is just the town-owned DPW sewer system. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. So if you look down here, that is the current wastewater treatment plant over at Camelot Drive. This is the giant force main that comes from the Water Street pump station back to the treatment plant, and then it pumps back out to the harbor. The limits, we go up to the Kingston town line right here. We're over in Colony Place area over here. We go down to Long Pond Road. And then right about here, just where it turns to Warren Ave, is where we end sewer currently right now.
Thank you. Yeah, the map's a little small. I mean, I can figure out geographically where we are, but thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions? Mr. Costello?
I did have a question, not so much about this, but to back up a touch with Karen. The first slide, you had a picture of a typical sewer system. Septic system, I'm sorry. Mix the words, get everybody confused, sorry about that. Recently in our past town meeting, we passed ADUs. On that same slide, where would an ADU and its septic system tie into that? Or is it an independent system that you have to provide?
No, we anticipate that, and we've had people come in and already ask these questions.
Okay.
Homeowners that are excited about the ADU possibility. So when they come in, we take a look at what they currently have. If they have a 4-bedroom house and they have a 4-bedroom septic system, they're allowed to up one, and they can tie in their ADU to their current septic system. There's a couple of caveats to that, and we came across that the other day. Somebody came in with a 4-bedroom house and a 4-bedroom septic system, and he wanted to put in an ADU. But upon further review, he had a finished basement. So his +1 had already happened, and his home was deed restricted already, which means he's going to have to expand his septic system in order to be granted the right to an ADU.
But at the end of the day, there'll be 2 pipes into that system.
It'll be a separate one going to that system, right?
Okay.
Yep.
All right, very good, thank you.
Yep.
Do we have, Mr. Hartman, you have something to add?
I would just want to point out one other thing, because I hear a lot of focus now about expanding the wastewater treatment facility, extending wastewater to other parts of the community. The balance we have, so a lot of our town, I would say 65% of the town is rural residential, 3-acre zoning. If you run town sewer into those areas, we have no justification for 3-acre zoning. I think even in acre zoning areas, which is like the Chiltonville area, if we start running sewer lines down there, there may be unintended consequences of additional development. I think when you're in a village center area, half-acre zoning, more dense development, those areas, I don't see much of an issue. But I think we always have to be concerned about where whether it's water and wastewater, where those facilities are extended and the implications to the community. We just talked about 40B. Sawmill is an excellent example. That was zoned rural residential. It's at the very edge of the Mammoth Village, and we said it's 3-acre zoning. Because it has town water, and town water was accessible to the site, that's why there's 200 units. If there wasn't town water there, we wouldn't have seen 200-unit 40B. So again, as we look at that infrastructure that comes into a community, first of all, it's going to be harder and harder to have lower density development. Second of all, even if we keep that, a developer could look and say, hey, I've got water, or I have wastewater running in front of my property. Instead of those 10 houses, I can do 150. And so again, we need to keep that in mind too as we look at this issue.
Mr. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dale Weber, Precinct 3. I just want to clarify something Mr. Costello said in Karen's answer to Alan. I believe Alan said, so in that example that you laid out with the 4-family, I mean the 4-bedroom home with a finished cellar, and that if he or she wanted to build an ADU, I think Alan's walking away from that conversation with the understanding that all they would have to do is lay a new pipe
Oh, no.
from the
No, I'm
ADU
sorry.
into that system. Isn't that what you were told?
That's what I said, but I assume they had to upgrade this part of it first. to accept
Absolutely.
5 bedrooms.
Absolutely.
But,
They have to-
thank you.
They have to
Yes.
put in a separate
That is
system.
absolutely correct.
Not a pipe into the existing
Well,
system.
A newer
the
system,
tank,
bigger system.
right, the tank could be enough, if it's a 1,500-gallon tank, the tank would probably be big enough to hold the additional ADU. What will not be big enough will be the leaching field.
Is the field, right.
Yep,
So it's a
that would
whole
have to
new
be
system.
expended.
So it's a whole new system.
Pretty close, yeah, if you're in that situation.
Right, right.
Yeah, if you're not in that situation, and if you have a 4-bedroom house and a 4-bedroom septic system, you don't have a finished basement, and you don't have a, little man cave that you added on or something like that at an earlier time, then you can do the +1, but you'll still be deed restricted to 4 bedrooms. So it's a protection. We don't want someone adding on additional, what could be bedroom space onto a septic system that's, say, meant for 4 bedrooms, and now we're looking at 6 or 7. That's when you get into failure, and that's when you have a problem. So we're trying to protect.
Do we have any, Ms. Adelman?
I'm not sure who this question is for, but there's at least one town on the Cape that forbids the sale of certain fertilizers because of the phosphorus. Do you see any future in restricting fertilizers in Plymouth?
That is definitely a topic that's been brought up with the Board of Health. That's something that they would probably consider in the future. We here in the division, along with the board, can make regulations for the municipality. We're very limited to the regulations we can make for the private consumer. So here's an example, Roundup. We made a regulation that Roundup cannot be utilized in the toolbox for our municipality, meaning anything that's being treated for our outside space here in the town of Plymouth, Roundup cannot be used. But we do not have the authority to stop Home Depot from selling Roundup to the person who lives at 123 Main Street.
So can I follow up? So how did that town on the Cape do it? How can they restrict the sale of
They might have
fertilizer?
done a whole room petition, brought it to town meeting might have voted for it. They would send it to the Attorney General for review. The Attorney General agrees, then it could become something that stays in that municipality alone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other follow-up? Oh, sorry, Alexis.
So out of curiosity, for these IA systems, the betterment loans, are those available to Plymouth residents now, or do you have to wait until it's?
Oh, no. Loans are available currently through the Community Development Program. Oh, sorry, Lee's going to talk more? Oh, okay, through the Community Development Program, and it has been for a while. Yeah,
Thank you.
It's a great program.
Yeah, so if I could, we'll actually probably be going to fall town meeting seeking another appropriation. So town meeting borrows in advance from the state, and then we pay it back through the loan program. But we'll be looking for more money. And I wanted to also point out that if there are income qualified families, we have programs also. So this one is you pay for everything, and we put it on your tax bill. It's a 5% loan, and that's one. But we also have programs for families that have low incomes that we either can give them a loan to do the septic upgrade at 0% that's paid back when they sell the house, or in some cases, an outright grant too. So there are other programs for income qualified, not just simply the one. So there are a couple different options for people.
Okay, any other questions, either online or here in the room?
If I could just follow up.
Absolutely.
On something
Sure.
that Mr. Hartman said about 40B, and we understand, with housing, and that's a hot topic in town. But from, my department's view, and it's more about water quality and, infrastructure expansion and environmental protection. So when it comes down to when we have this CWMP done, and I'm sure when the town's master plan is developed, it's going to be probably a difficult decision for the town to be making, to walk that fine line on 40B development and some sewer expansion.
Sure, all right. Thank you. I think I kind of have a question regarding that, regarding sewer expansion, and I'm not sure if this question might even, maybe Lynn, you might have to weigh in on. But, you know, with sewer expansion or wastewater treatment expansion, you know, have we started looking into, in case that we need to do this, any sort of funding mechanism for this, similar to, you know, similar to, call it the town hall fund or something like that, that we start either paying into now or some sort of vehicle to kind of get ready for something if we are going to expand? Is there any? I think, because I think that this, I had heard something about something down on the Cape through, it might have even been brought up at the Herring Pond watershed, something about, was it MVP or something like that down on the Cape, where they were, some of the Cape communities were paying into a fund to help assist with sewer expansion, and I can probably get more on that and get back to you.
I
but
mean, it's something that we could look into. I'm not familiar with it.
MWRA, okay, thank you. I can't get to my Google quick enough here. I've got everybody's face from the Zoom
Yeah,
up here.
so normally, for expansion, obviously, there's a cost, initial cost, but usually, at least the ones that we've done in the recent past, is we charge a betterment to the people who are
The
hooking up.
ratepayers, yeah.
And that betterment can be paid like over a 20-year period.
Okay.
So that they don't have to pay it all at one time.
Okay.
That's an option. The other thing that we have access to, which is it's a similar loan program through Massachusetts Clean Water Trust, which is what the Title V loan program is through that same agency. But we used that loan program for the town when we had the force main repair.
Okay.
And it was like a 2%, you know, interest rate versus, you know, the going rate kind of thing. So that's sort of an option too. And that can be used in conjunction with the charging of the betterment. So then the betterment maybe won't be as much, you know, as if we were borrowing on our own.
Okay, I think where I was trying to go is like, how do we plan for
Yeah.
something? I mean, that's definitely the question that's on everybody's mind in town right now, is getting prepared for
Yeah.
the large problems that we have coming down the line. Yes, go
I'm
ahead.
wondering if
Can I
anybody.
just add one thing to that?
Sure.
So, yes, planning for that, but those programs want you to basically have a shovel-ready project in hand before they'll award you that grant or loan. So, yes, it's things we're thinking about, but it's way too early for us to actually apply for any of those at this point.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
This may be another rhetorical question, but I'm wondering if, in light of the fact that the Cape, a lot of the Cape is in this zone, whether that's done anything to stop their real estate from blossoming, and whether there's any concern about whether that's going to happen here in Plymouth when people realize what it's going to cost them to live here just for sewage treatment or septic treatment. Rhetorical question.
Those are the ones they love to answer, right? The rhetorical ones, okay. Are there any questions from any of our chairs online or any town meeting members? I see there's a couple of them online. Seeing none, I thank you all for taking time this evening. Thank you, Karen, for coming in, appreciate it. Okay, moving along. This next item is the Town of Plymouth Land Acknowledgement Statement. This was what Mr. Arienti spoke to us about at I think that was the last meeting. They're blurring together to me now. And I believe that you all got a copy of it not too long after that meeting, and that it went out again. I'd like to introduce John Platt from the No Place for Hate committee here in town. Oh, and we've got another copy here in front of us. If you weren't planning on it, I'm more than happy to kind of read it into the record again for everyone, especially since they're getting it handed to them at the moment. This Town of Plymouth land acknowledgement was adapted from the Town of Plymouth Open Space Committee land acknowledgement and authored by the Plymouth Area League of Women Voters Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee with the participation, oversight, and advisement from the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe and other indigenous members of the Plymouth area community. So, Mr. Platt, the floor is yours, and if you want to read what the acknowledgement is, go right ahead.
I'll leave it to you to read it, but they can read it up there. Good, okay. The No Place for Hate Committee decided at its last monthly meeting to adopt the reading of this statement at its meetings going forward. I mentioned this to my friend and neighbor, Bill Arienti, and he thought it was appropriate to bring to your committee as well. The reading of the acknowledgement, you can see it's short, it takes less than a minute to read, but our committee felt that it's an important, timely, and respectful step to take. And now Phoebe Flynn of the League of Women Voters, who has been leading this effort, will tell you more about it. Thanks for your time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So I appreciate the introduction from both John and from Matt. As John mentioned, I'm Phoebe Flynn, and I'm here as a member of the League of Women Voters of the Plymouth area, specifically as the chair for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, where we've been working over the last few months with leaders from Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe and also other Indigenous leaders here in the area to curate a land acknowledgement for the town of Plymouth. While some committees here in Plymouth, as Matt had already read, the acknowledgement of where we got our words and how they were curated. Some do have a land acknowledgement. The only one currently on the Town of Plymouth website, however, resides under the Open Space Committee. And in conversations with Patrick Farah, he said over a few years ago, he and others, to include Melissa Freddy, who's the chairwoman of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe, worked together to write what is currently on the Town of Plymouth website. But it's kind of infrequent in use and not necessarily consistent across town government and other meetings and boards and committees. And so we're hoping to improve that. Our recent work with Melissa and others led to a desire to make it more thoughtful, do a thoughtful rewrite that includes making it more contemporary, more inclusive, and acknowledging history a little bit more. We were hoping Melissa Freddy would be able to join us tonight, but unfortunately, many of you know she's very busy down in the town of Bourne as well, so she was unable to join us, but absolutely provides her endorsement from Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe on this land acknowledgement. Of course, we'd like to present that. I'll read it here in just a second, although it is up on the board for your consideration. And like No Place for Hate, the League of Women Voters at their last board meeting also voted to adopt it for use in meetings and other events. And we feel that using a land acknowledgement is, it is a common practice here in Massachusetts and across America and in Canada and other countries for those who value their Indigenous neighbors like we do here in Plymouth. So we'd like to go ahead and present that. I'll read it now at this time and then open it for any questions. So here's the acknowledgement that we've curated. We acknowledge that we are meeting on the sacred land of the Wampanoag Nation. We honor the Herring Pond Wampanoag people as the original stewards of this place now known as Plymouth. And we honor all Wampanoag tribes, along with the countless other Indigenous peoples who traversed these lands for centuries before us. As we acknowledge many historical injustices, may we keep the first peoples of this land in our hearts and minds as we discuss issues affecting the valuable members of our community and their ancestral homelands today. So.
Before we open it up to questions, I just want to kind of, because Mr. Arienti was unable to be here this evening, I believe his request of us, and we'd need to have someone here make the motion, was to move that the Committee of Precinct chairs read this, I believe, at the restructuring meeting, or kind of the first meeting after the election, at least once a year. I think he was open to whatever the COPC desired, but I think he was looking for that motion. If we are to adopt this, it needs to be moved and voted upon, so. Ms. Adelman.
Do you think it's appropriate to make the motion at this meeting or wait until after the election? Or does it matter?
I don't believe that it would matter.
Then I would motion to accept it.
I'll second.
So the motion is to accept this. Is there a specific, is it to before every meeting, or is it at the restructure meeting? Go ahead, Pompey.
Yeah, I would just recommend that that be modified to say it should be read at the orientation meeting after the elections, when we have new people coming on, and it should be read at that meeting. Oh, sorry. Once again, what I was saying was that we should, I would modify that motion to say it should be read at the orientation meeting after the election so that all new members were constantly aware of it every year.
Okay, yeah.
My comment would be, it takes a minute to read. I think it should be read at the opening after the Pledge of Allegiance
So-
at every meeting. And I think some of the committees in town are discussing whether or not they're going to do it at their committee levels.
Sure, before we get into discussion, though, I'd like to
Well,
get a second on Mr. Delafield's motion, so that we
Well,
can get into discussion.
I'm not.
You can, if you want a second.
No,
you can.
I just, I was speaking to the main motion. Sorry about that.
All right. So at this point, I think the main motion is on there. There's a motion to amend by Mr. Delafield to make it the first meeting for the reorganization meeting, or the first meeting after the town election.
As a minimum.
Mr. Costello?
I don't know if we're getting the cart before the horse, but shouldn't we vote that we're even accepting this before we say how often we're going to recite it? I have a couple questions on it.
Yes, sir,
Sure.
please.
So since that I did kind of misspeak, we are in discussion of the original motion that Ms. Alleman made, so please go ahead.
There was a couple lines here that I'm uncomfortable with
Yes, Mr. Costello.
having committee of precinct chairs sign on to and repeat annually or monthly. The very first sentence. Are we saying that the land presently is the sacred land of the Wampanoag tribe or nation?
Yes, sir. It
It's
is.
not owned by other people at this time, the town of Plymouth, the residents of
It is owned
Plymouth?
by other people of this town, and is a historical sacred land of the Wampanoag Nation, that's correct.
Makes it sound like it presently still is, and that makes me a little nervous. And then halfway down, I really have a problem with, we're acknowledging many historical injustices. Can you give us examples of
Yes, sir.
historic
So
injustices
here-
that the townspeople have committed, that we're gonna recite this every month?
Yes, sir. These are historical injustices, obviously not present injustices. They include the fact that there were originally 69 Wampanoag tribes here in this area. We now are currently familiar with about 4 of those. Here in Plymouth, there were also more than one, whereas now Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe are the only surviving. Yep, sorry. Here in Plymouth, the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe, people of that tribe are the only living descendants of the Wampanoag people that lived here in what is now considered Plymouth.
I guess that's an answer, but I think as a committee, I would think we would want to discuss this paragraph and make sure it's something that we want to sign off on, representing 162 town meeting members and the town as a whole.
Yes, sir?
I'm not 100% sure that I'm comfortable with all of the language.
Sorry, did you want to?
No, John was just offering, if anybody would like additional documentation or more detailed answers to those questions that we can't provide at that time, we could certainly, come back or provide additional outside of this
I'd be
meeting.
very receptive to that, and that's a very nice compromise. Thank you.
And that is why we're here,
Yeah.
is to bring it up, to make it known. Many towns have this, we don't here in Plymouth, and obviously Plymouth is a town that is very closely affiliated, with our Native American counterparts and our indigenous population. And this is something that is a step in the right direction towards equity inclusion for all of our citizens. And so that's why we're presenting it. And we do appreciate all of the great support, as well as those of you who are uncomfortable with it and would like to discuss it more.
So, yeah, Ms. Alleman.
I guess I'd like to clarify or amend my motion, and that was to discuss accepting this. And I thought at a later time, we could decide when it would be recited.
So I'm going to need to weigh in on a parliamentarian here, because I've got two possible amendments here, so I want to get this cleaned up before we start voting, so there's no confusion on this.
I'm going to withdraw my motion so we can restate a motion.
Okay, so Pat withdraws her motion to accept this. Mr. Brewster?
Yeah, what,
You had a motion, you no longer have a motion.
yep.
You had a motion, you no longer have a motion.
Right.
So, and I think that Ms. Alderman is correct in she was taking it back because it morphed into something that she didn't want. So
Sure. So now there's actually no
we're
motion
still
on
in
the table.
discussion.
Yeah. Still in discussion. So.
No, I just, it's clear now as a parliamentarian that we do not have a motion before us, therefore, that's withdrawn.
Okay, Pat?
I'd like, well, I know there's reorganization after Saturday, but I think this should be an agenda item again for the next meeting.
So you-
Whoever's sitting here at this meeting.
Sure,
as
so
the-
we can absolutely table that to the June meeting. And the discussion on that, I would probably tend to lean that way because as we've seen, this board can change drastically over Saturday, both within its members in the precinct and then who ends up being either back here or not. I do like that it's before us, and I know that we can have this as an agenda item, even if it's a different body that's sitting here. It can still be on the agenda because that will still be run through the current chair, if that works. So then you'd have to come back again next month.
I don't mind. I'm here to
Okay.
discuss uncomfortable topics.
So, Pat, is that a motion to table this till?
Yes.
Do we need to do a motion to table that?
Well,
You would-
Make no action.
You-
so-
you would-
Technically, if someone makes a motion, you have. Technically, if someone makes a motion, you have to address it as a motion. So you'd have to go through all the crap.
Yeah, it hasn't been seconded yet, I don't think. It hasn't been seconded, and.
No, I just,
I think just as a parliamentarian, I don't think that it is necessary, but if you make it, then
I
that's
know,
fine.
I wasn't making it as a motion, I just, when you're preparing your agenda for the next meeting, I think this item should be on that agenda.
And that's,
If Pat used the word a suggestion as opposed to. a
yeah, and I probably misheard that, but Mr. Costello, go ahead.
If there's no clear motion, I would, in the interest of fairness, I would make a motion that we accept the paperwork this evening from the group, ask for all additional backup to back up the statement, and in a meeting 2 months from tonight, so we have some time to read the information, it's a dedicated agenda item.
Do I
I'll
have a
second
second on
that.
that? Ms. Adelman seconds that. Discussion. Mr. Weber.
Yeah, I share some feelings here. And I would ask that, I don't know if it's appropriate to ask for a friendly amendment to the motion that was just made, but I'm looking at this as how does this fit within our scope? And I've brought this up before, but this is clearly a passionate issue, an emotional issue, based on historical issues. And I just think that I'd like to have the scope of our committee of precinct chairs before we commit to making, I'm hesitant to call it a political statement, but it's a historical, compassionate statement. And I just don't know if it's properly situated within the scope of the committee of precinct chairs. So I think we need to look at that. Thank you.
Sure, I have two hands that were online. I'm going to go with Sue Wentworth and then Ms. Pratt.
Yeah, I was just looking for just more information if we do bring this up again. to find out what other towns and within those towns, which committees are doing this, and if it happens to be the same language that we're looking to use here, just to get a reference point of what's happening around us, so that we can make this decision.
Is that something you can add to, because what I'll do is, and I know that there was the request earlier for more background information, is I'll have Chelsea reach out to you guys, if that works. Ms. Pratt?
Yeah, I was just supplementing what Sue asked. My question is, what boards and committees in Plymouth have adopted this? And based on who's adopted it, what is the frequency of their reading of this particular statement?
Okay, I see notes being furiously written down, so I think that we'll get that answer. Mr. Delafield?
Yeah, we have a motion in front of us, and I personally don't think it's necessary. I think that what we need to do is just keep it on our agenda for the next meeting. And I just have to stress, I don't think we need a motion or anything else, and that's the way we'll vote on it. Not that we won't discuss it, we should keep it on the agenda.
Well, I think the motion, Mr. Costello, is to table this to a future meeting. I believe you said July, and have you said 2 meetings from now, so that would be July. So, and then you wanted the additional background information in time so that we could.
Yeah, my initial motion was to give the applicant time to get us some information, give us some time to review it. And I thought 1 meeting was a little bit tight for a time frame, so I asked for 2 meetings. But if it's caused some confusion, I mean, I'll certainly withdraw my motion if it's going to restrict us in our discussion. I personally couldn't accept this tonight or next month unless I got some of the questions that many people have asked of the applicant. Thank you.
So did you withdraw your motion? Because I'll just keep it on as an agenda item, well, if I'm here.
If it's causing confusion, I'd like to withdraw my motion at this time.
Okay. All right, so the motion has been withdrawn. Thank you, Ms. Alman.
I just want to thank Heidi and Mr. Platt for coming. And the first time I heard this, I was watching a Conservation Committee meeting, and it was just very touching. And I thought it was very appropriate for the Conservation and for the Open Space Committee. And I understand that Dale thinks maybe it's not within our scope, but I really do think it's well worth recognizing, and I thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you both for coming before us and bringing this to us, and I'll have Chelsea reach out to you for the more information, and we'll get that to either this body or whoever the future body is here come next week. Thank you so much. Good to see you both. Okay, moving on to Mr. Costello and the Legislative Oversight Committee update.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman. Legislative Oversight Committee had taken a short hiatus over town meeting, but we did actually meet on the 6th, May 6th. And we picked up where we left off, talked about some old town meeting articles, or older town meeting articles that we had already had in the pipeline. We also talked about putting together and starting to document new articles of the most recent town meeting that went past. We have an upcoming meeting on June 3rd in the Cranberry Room, January 3rd at 6 o'clock. One vote that did come out of the May 6th vote was that we were asked by the administrative assistant, COPC, if we had an interest in getting on the agenda, and we voted that the Legislative Oversight Committee voted that we would like to get in touch with the chair or the vice chair and dedicate an agenda item for the June meeting, where we would come before this committee, let you know or show you some of the work that we have started to undertake. Find out what this committee's feelings are, and if they want us to proceed, they want us to change course, but at least catch them up on everything we've done so far. So we'd like to put that on for June, I'm sorry, not June 3rd, but our June COPC meeting.
That'd be the 20th, I think.
The 20th.
Yep.
I announced the meeting, and the administrative assistant has it on our agenda. So I think that concludes my update for this month. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Costello. Last Charter Review Committee update from Mr. Golden, possibly?
It will be my last charter review update, at least as a member of the Committee of Precinct Chairs, because regardless of what occurs this weekend, my tenure as a town meeting member will be coming to an end because I did not renew my interest in town meeting, although I remain quite interested in what happens here. The Legislative Oversight Committee has concluded its substantive review of the charter. We are going to now refocus on organizing the work that we've put forward. We're going to continue to meet on Tuesdays, at least for now. Our next meeting will be next Tuesday. The charter changes that we're proposing have gone to Town Council. She'll review them, offer her recommendations, and that will be brought back to the committee in due course. Once we have that review completed, the charter will be sent out to this body and others in order to start building some capacity behind it and some support behind it. If folks have questions, they can certainly contact me. I just want to express my gratitude to the folks who serve on that committee, some of whom are in the room here tonight. We literally read through every single line of the charter. I personally read every single line of the charter out loud during our meetings. It was arduous. I'm told by some of my colleagues that it was quite boring to watch from home. But the committee was diligent and thoughtful. We had some incredible discussions, and I think the changes that we're putting forward will really improve the form of government that we have now. So I want to thank those folks for all their efforts. I'm happy to come back with further update when I'm no longer sitting on the COPC and help shepherd this through in whatever capacity I may be in.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. I believe Carmen's not here this evening to give a Town Handbook Review Committee update. I do know that the next meeting is May 29th at 6 p.m. And I believe that's in the Cranberry Room and also via Zoom as well. So that agenda will be posted by the 27th, I believe, on the town website. That moves us on to new and old business. For me, I just wanted to run through a couple of important dates that us as COPC members should be aware of. Obviously, the election is this Saturday, the 18th. That means that any town meeting members, new or newly reelected, need to be sworn in within 21 days with the town clerk. Interestingly enough, precincts are required to reorganize in 20 days. So hopefully you can get in touch with your new town meeting members because they cannot vote at the reorganization meeting unless they're sworn in, even though they have a longer length of time to be sworn in. So that puts precinct reorganizations by June 7th. And then our next meeting will be June 20th with whoever the representatives are that come out of those various caucuses. And it'll be here at 7 p.m. in the Great Hall. And I'd be amiss to not thank Mr. Golden for his time here on the COPC, but also as a town meeting member. I do appreciate his efforts. I know I've had a lot of discussions with him in the past about the town of Plymouth and direction, and I'm sure there will be many more regardless of the outcome on Saturday. But thank you, Mr. Golden, for your time here at the COPC and in town meeting. With that, we're going to go into public comment. So let's see, do we have anyone online for public comment? No? Anyone in the room for public comment? No. No. You sure, Al? Okay. Yeah, all right. All right. If that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
I
Oh.
wanted to say something before, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
I don't think Catherine is going to run for COP again, or, and I just want to thank Catherine for her service as the chair, and I want to thank everyone who served here, and I wish them all well during the reelection, and it's been a pleasure sitting on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor of adjournment? There we go. Thank you. Good night.